Well, the Department of Justice's indictment against John Bolton, who served as one of Donald Trump's national security advisors in his first administration, has dropped, and the details have even some of Trump's most bitter critics admitting Bolton is in serious trouble. I'm going to break down all of the details, which are remarkable. This indictment is really something else. I'm going to have all of the details just in a second. Before I do, make sure you subscribe over at undercurrents.tv for the full premium experience of the show. Help us hit 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. We're just a couple hundred of you away, so subscribe over there. And of course, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts as well. Now, let's take a look at this indictment. I'm going to read from the first part of the indictment right here. It basically says the defendant, John Robert Bolton II, resided in Montgomery County, Maryland from the 1980s through 2019, served intermittently in a variety of senior U.S. government positions, including as an assistant attorney general in the U.S. DOJ, undersecretary of state in the State Department, ambassador to the UN, and his last position of public service from 2018 to 2019, April 2018 to September 2019, did not last that long, as assistant to the president for national security affairs, which was commonly known as the National Security Advisor. So the charges against Bolton stem from him essentially, allegedly according to the indictment, sending diary entries, which he referred to as diary entries, to two relatives over the course of his time as NSA. He was sort of contemporaneously taking notes that included classified information and sending them and then discussing them on non-secure, non-governmental channels. And immediately after, according to the indictment, literally like the day he left as Trump's NSA, Trump got him out of there. He was famously trying to pit the hawkish Bolton against some of the more let's say dovish. Dovish isn't quite the right word, but dovish members of his administration. So these two camps of the Republican Party foreign policy. Trump brought Bolton in to kind of have him duke it out with members of his administration who disagreed with the neoconservative GOP consensus that Bolton represented and helped dominate the Republican Party with for a long time. So that's why he only lasted from April 2018 to September 2019. But Bolton was, according to the indictment, shopping around a memoir based on all of this information the day after. The day after he's shopping around this memoir, he leaves the White House and is immediately shopping this information around. So according to the indictment, it looks like the government has mountains of evidence against Bolton. Obviously, his home and his office were raided, and that's when the uproar from many people on the left, and actually a lot of Trump's Republican kind of never Trump opponents, started to say this case is retribution. This case against John Bolton is another instance of Trump basically smearing his political enemies and all of that. But remember, and this is an important bit, the Biden administration picked up this investigation from the first Trump administration. So it wasn't just the first Trump administration, although Bolton was not charged for the years of the Biden administration. That's important because it sure looks like the case against him was serious, and the Biden administration declined to go after Bolton for reasons that may have been as political as Trump's reason for going after Bolton. It's obviously a political decision not to charge someone in a position of power. Comey, for example, declining to charge James Comey, declining to charge Hillary Clinton. That's political. It's not just staying out of politics. It's a political decision in and of itself, and it sure looks like there was a lot of evidence here. The other part of the indictment is that Bolton's, again, this is one of the premier Iran hawks in Washington, D.C., Bolton's non-secure communications, his email, appeared to have been hacked by cyber agents, I believe is the term in the indictment, associated with Iran. So Bolton was keeping diary entries to turn into a book that he could sell for personal profit, sending them to relatives on non-secure governmental channels that were allegedly hacked by Iran, and actually, according to the indictment, gave Iran access to sensitive information about American national security. Meanwhile, over the last several years, these are points made in the indictment to show that John Bolton had full knowledge of how he was supposed to handle secure information. Bolton was criticizing others who had been accused of improperly securing classified, secret, top secret information. Now, it looks like Bolton was knowingly, for the sake of personal profit, at least in part, he may argue that he just wanted to tell the world what was going on behind the scenes of the Trump administration. But selling a book is personal profit. That Bolton was, for the sake of doing that, sending classified information regularly on obviously non-secure channels. It looks like they were using messaging apps and regular email accounts. The government obviously has that information. The government, I'm always skeptical of DOJ indictments. That's sort of your job if you're in journalism, is to not take what the government says as fact, of course. When an indictment comes with evidence from the primary sources themselves, meaning there was a raid on Bolton's home and evidence was collected, and that evidence includes some of the markings on these documents, evidence includes hard drives and the like, then you get into territory where you still have to remain skeptical. You still have to say, maybe there's something missing. That's the point of our legal system. Bolton will have an opportunity to defend himself. But this looks really, really serious, and it looks really bad. And obviously, Donald Trump himself and Joe Biden and Mike Pence have had questions raised about their own storage of classified information. Information, by the way, it should always be noted, is wildly overclassified in our government. That is a problem people on both sides of the aisle will tell you exists. So you can, be transmitting information that's about what was on the cafeteria lunch item for the day. What was the lunch menu in the cafeteria for the day? And sometimes stuff like that just is wildly overclassified, or some random scheduling detail. Those things do get overclassified, and it's, the case sometimes that people get charged or people are accused of mishandling classified information, and it was a silly, trivial detail that had no real relevance to national security and just got swept up in the overclassification process. On the other hand, though, this indictment of John Bolton, based on what we know the government has as evidence in this case, it seems like Iran actually had access by tapping into his email, by hacking into his email, which was not properly secured, which he knew should have been secured differently, national security information. So this is quite a bad look for John Bolton, no question about it whatsoever. And even to the point where Eli Honig, who you may know as a bitterly anti-Trump legal analyst, is saying here, this is different. I think the headline in New York Magazine, let me pull it up. Yeah, it's quote, "The John Bolton indictment is different." He goes on to say, the indictment charges Bolton with 18 federal crimes, so 8 related to transmitting sensitive national defense information and 10 more for improperly retaining the same. So transmitting and retaining. The information at issue, Honig goes on to say, contained deadly serious government secrets, and that's according to the indictment, which is based on the evidence the government has on Bolton. The government raided, again, his home and his office. Honig goes on to say, Bolton allegedly disclosed to outsiders information about, quote, future attack plans by foreign adversary groups, details of impending missile launches by foreign adversaries, information about sensitive intelligence sources, and assessments about the leaders of foreign countries. Apparently, Bolton would type up notes based on information he learned as NSA, and as we were just saying, he'd then use his personal AOL account, which was eventually hacked by Iran, to email diary-like entries to 2 people, both relatives of his, who had no security clearances. Bolton also allegedly kept highly sensitive documents in his private home. Now, to the point about even Honig recognizing how serious this is, notes, Bolton, through his attorney, categorically denies wrongdoing. And while we now have a clear sense of the prosecution's theory of criminality, we don't yet have a definitive read on the strength of the proof or on Bolton's defense. But for now, he goes on to say, we can look at a series of reliable collateral indicators that suggest this prosecution is legitimate. And again, this is somebody who is critical of Donald Trump's basically retribution efforts as president of the United States. So Honig says, consider first that the DOJ's instant investigation of Bolton reportedly escalated during the Biden administration, though remember they never charged Bolton. Trump surely was delighted to find it waiting for him when he took office, but unlike the case against Comey and Letitia James, Honig said this wasn't originated by the president and his band of gleeful political enforcers, so that gives you some flavor of where Honig is coming from. And says it also appears that the Bolton matter arose organically, not because some official decided to root around for dirt buried in the mortgage files of a disfavored subject, referring, of course, to Letitia James at that point. So, if Eli Honig is saying Trump might have a case, one of the most critical people in the media of Donald Trump's retribution efforts, if Eli Honig is looking at this indictment and saying it's serious for John Bolton, and goes on in his conclusion to write, the Bolton case appears to differ in kind from the most recent prosecutions of Comey and James. This one relates to far more serious conduct, and it arose under less dubious circumstances. So, now I'm going to disagree completely with Honig's conclusion where he says Trump has created with his payback spree a problem. It's increasingly hard to tell the bogus cases against his political antagonists from the valid ones. Pointing the finger at Trump for that is myopic. The finger actually should really probably first be pointed at James Comey. That's an argument for another day, but this is just to say Honig and myself and people on the right and left can disagree about Trump and retribution and James Comey and Letitia James and still look at this Bolton indictment and say it's incredibly, incredibly serious for John Bolton. And I want to pull up this CNN rundown of the story as well. They did a kind of what to know about the Bolton indictment case, and they say, what's next for Bolton? Well, the charges if proven are possibly more serious than those in other high-profile investigations into the mishandling of classified info related to Hillary Clinton, Mike Pence, Joe Biden, and Trump. That's according, CNN is citing Eli Honig there because he's their senior legal analyst, and they say Bolton is alleged to have actively disseminated classified information of the, quote, highest level to family members who had no security clearance, and Honig's quote in CNN here is, if DOJ can prove this, this is big, big trouble for John Bolton. And that is completely obvious. Bolton is now claiming he issued a statement Thursday night saying he has become, quote, Trump's latest target in the weaponization of his Justice Department. And Bolton claims that his book, which you'll remember was called The Room Where It Happened, the Trump administration at the time was saying it was trying to block the publishing of it. And in the indictment itself, actually, it notes, this is very interesting, that after a national security review of books, which is a common thing that the intelligence community will do, the classified information was taken out of Bolton's book, which is interesting, right? Because it shows that the information was serious enough for Bolton to remove it, even though he had been transmitting it on non-secure channels for all of that time. So there's some concession that this was serious classified, potentially damaging information, the fact that it came out of the book. And Bolton is saying that his book was reviewed and approved by, quote, the appropriate experienced career clearance officials. Then came Trump, too, who embodies what Joseph Stalin's head of secret police once said, quote, you show me the man and I will show you the crime. Bolton goes on to say these charges are not just about his focus on me or my diaries, but his intensive effort to intimidate his opponents to ensure that he alone determines what is said about his conduct. Dissent and disagreement are foundational to America's constitutional system and vitally important to our freedom. I look forward to the fight to defend my lawful conduct and expose his abuse of power. Now, I was in the Oval Office yesterday when Donald Trump was asked about this news. He sort of rehashed his viral Ruth Bader Ginsburg moment when he said this was the first time hearing of it. He said it was the first he had heard about it in the Oval Office during that major IVF announcement. I got a question into him about his reaction to pro-life conservatives who were already critical of his announcement. He said it's the most pro-life thing he could do. We'll save that topic for another day, but he was pretty eager to move on from that question. I'm much more eager to talk about John Bolton, who he said instantly as a reaction, quote, he's, a bad person. I think he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy, too bad, but that's the way it goes, right? And again, with the Bolton indictment, the apparent evidence that the government has against Bolton is substantial. It seems to have come directly from Bolton's own home and office, and they obviously had access to what happened with the Iran leak. There's some evidence that they were going back and forth on all of that. Stuff was at the top secret level, Bolton being sent back and forth, and Bolton using... This is just a weird detail, almost a poetic detail, but Bolton was messaging in all caps and exclamation points, not unlike Trump Truth Social tweets. Truth Social tweets, that's an oxymoron, but Truth Social posts or tweets back in the day. It's the concept of the projection. So many people who talk down about Donald Trump and accuse Donald Trump of shattering norms and abusing his power. It turns out, hey, this is my perspective, that it happens a lot. They are projecting because they've been guilty of some of the very same things that they then accuse Donald Trump of doing. And the evidence that Bolton, apparently they do have messages. And that's another instance of the government's case looking like it's based on these primary sources and very real, constant all caps and exclamation points in a way that just Trumpian, almost poetically Trumpian. So it's looking pretty bad for John Bolton. And when people who are critical of Trump's, again, like retribution efforts are saying that, you know how serious the case against John Bolton actually is. So we will, of course, continue following this story. No question about that. Thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate it. You can subscribe over at undercurrents.tv for the full premium experience of the show. This week we have an extended full version of our interview with journalist Luke Rosiak, who has been in the new media space for a long time, has a new story about a near disaster at a cathedral here in D.C. that is being buried by the media in stunning ways. So go check that out at undercurrents.tv. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And on YouTube, maybe you'll be our 100,000th subscriber. See you back here soon with more.